All right, awesome. So, welcome to Michael's Community Classroom. We're so excited to be back here today. My name is Allie W., and I'm from Yarn Inspirations. And we're here with the lovely Marley Bird, who will be our teacher today. So excited to get things kicked off for another great class. Today, we are going to be learning the squishy Fisherman's Rib Knit Blanket. I think this is a great technique to be learning today, and I know Marley's going to do a wonderful job teaching today. So we're definitely excited to
You just
pass
jinxed
things
me.
over to you, Marley.
You just jinxed me completely. Hey everybody, how are you? Thank you, Allie, for that introduction. Welcome. If this is the first time you've joined us in the Michael's Classroom, we're so glad you're here. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see where there is a little like thought bubble where it says chat. If you click that, that'll open up the chat for you where you can ask comments. And as I'm teaching, Allie will be in there either answering questions or she'll jump in and say, hey, Marley, we have a question. So that is the best place for you to ask the questions today. There's also a link to the Google Doc for the pattern I'm going to be going over today. And like Allie said, it's called the Squishy Fisherman's Rib Knit Blanket. This is one of those blankets that it really is just a squishy little piece of fabric that you get to wrap yourself up in. So it's great if you use a yarn that is nice and soft and really something squishy that you want to play around with. The pattern calls for Bernat Softy Chunky, but in reality, you really could use any yarn. Just change up your needle size to get gauge or adjust the cast on number to get the size you want. It's really not that difficult. So I am going to look at my gallery view, and those of you who have your videos on, show of hands, how many of you have done fisherman's rib or brioche stitch before? No hands. Ooh, one hand, one hand. So only one of you. That's great. That's perfect because it's one of those tricky stitches, you guys. This is a knit stitch that we are going to work with another stitch. Actually, let me rephrase that. The brioche stitch is where it's a knit stitch and you're knitting that together with what is yarn over. The fisherman's rib stitch is, I like to call it as like the easy man's brioche, because we're going to knit in the row below the stitch that's on your needle to get the brioche type look. We get that fisherman's rib sort of squishy look. Now, when you work on fisherman's rib, you typically want to use, how do I say this? The stitches tend to be a little bit larger. So usually you will use a smaller needle. I think this pattern calls for the same size needle that the yarn typically calls for, but in most patterns, when you are working a fisherman's rib or a brioche, you're actually using a smaller needle because the stitches tend to be really big and airy. So it's one of those things that you will typically do. So I'm gonna go ahead and jump down to my hand view with everybody else. And hopefully you guys can see this. I have a couple things that we can go over here. But all I've done is I'm just using a regular old set of needles. And I'm using circulars purely because I like to use circular needles. When you are making your blanket, you definitely would want to use circulars because you have a lot of stitches. You want to be able to accommodate the size of the blanket on your needles. I've cast on a odd number of stitches between my marker, and then I have 5 stitches on the outside of my marker. And I did just a basic long tail cast on. You can use any cast on you like. For this, it doesn't have to be a long tail, and it could be whatever you want. So what I've done here is I have 5 stitches out here, 5 stitches out here, and I think I put 13 here. Now for the pattern, it tells you to cast on 113. So I've kind of just really condensed down what the pattern calls for, okay? It's at this point that you would go ahead and you would knit 7 rows of garter stitch, and that's just to give yourself a little bit of fabric. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just work some garter stitch here with you. I'm not going to do a full 7 rows, but I am just going to do some basic knitting. Now I do knit continental. All that means is I hold the yarn in my left hand. Everything else is the same. I'm still just knitting, but I'm holding the yarn in my left hand. So I'll do this first row with it in my left hand, and I'll do the next row with it in my right hand. And if you're going to cast on for the blanket, it would be 113. If you're going to do a small swatch and work along with me, go ahead and cast on, what would that be, 23 stitches? I think I have 23 stitches. Help me out. Is that the math? Did I do the math right, guys? So I have 5 on either side, 13 in the middle. Yeah, that's 23. It's Thursday. It's I'm gonna blame that, even though math and I are not like the best of friends on a regular day of the week, on any other day of the week. So go ahead and cast on 23 if you want to work on a swatch with me. That's perfectly fine. And then we're just going to get ourselves a couple of garter stitch rows so that we have something to work into here. And do you have to place these markers? No, you don't have to. I really like the markers there because they're an indication for me of something's different out here and something's different out here. Because as you're working on your blanket, you'll keep these stitches in garter stitch and these stitches in garter stitch. And that's why I really like to use markers, okay? So this time I'm gonna hold the yarn in my other hand for those of you who like to see that. This is not my preferred way, but I will do my best, so bear with me. I tend to go a little bit slower, which is really good for classes when I do the yarn in this hand. You can see here, obviously I'm not as efficient, but I can get the job done. Give everybody a chance to catch up. So as I said, in the pattern, it says to cast on, and then you would go ahead and you would do 3 rows of garter stitch. And that's just going to give yourself a border at the beginning of your blanket, and it establishes the side border of your blanket that you maintain throughout the entire blanket, okay? Now, once you get started on the body, which is what we're gonna do here in just a second, it's just a repeat of 2 rows, and you just go, repeating those 2 rows, and you're gonna feel how squishy it gets, and it's just really nice. But what you're also going to notice is it's gonna feel like working 2 rows at a time. It's gonna feel like it's taking forever to get very far on your blanket. And that's because as you're working Fisherman's rib, and we work a stitch below the stitch that's on our needle, every other stitch, consequently, it will take 2 rows to complete 1 row of the fabric, okay? And that'll make sense here in a minute. All right, so I did 2 rows of garter stitch here. I feel like that's enough. You guys know how to knit. I shouldn't have to waste your time just knitting the whole time. But this is what we're going to get started with. And the reason I wanted to start here at this point right here, I'm just using a basic worsted weight yarn, you guys. The reason I start at this point for the video is I want you to see how it's very difficult to see anything starting at the start. But then once you get going, we're gonna pull in another swatch. So this would be as if I'm starting the first row. So I'm going to knit these first 5 stitches. So you'll see in the pattern it says knit 5. And then you're going to notice I have a marker there. There's a reason I have a marker. Okay, so I'm going to knit 5. And then I simply slip my marker. Okay, so again, that marker is not written in the pattern. I place it there because I find it very helpful. This is where we have the star in the pattern. So that lets us know this is where we're going to repeat from. Okay, you ready? We're going to purl 1 stitch. So I purl this first stitch. And now I'm going to knit 1 stitch below. So I'm going to bring my yarn back to the back. And then here's this, let's see, can you guys see this? Here's the stitch on my needle. There's the stitch below. So I'm going to go just right below. It's like I'm going right beneath that purl bump and sticking my needle in there. Can everybody see that? And I'm going to knit it. And off. Purl the next stitch. And then knit the next stitch in the row below. What's hard here is as you're getting started here, it's really hard to see the stitches in general. It's just tricky, it's difficult. But as you start working along, I'm going to pull in another color because I think it'll be easier for you to see color-wise. As you get working along, you start to get this really nice column of stitches. So I'm gonna do this again. This would be still row 1. So I'm going to get over a little bit further so it's easier for you to see those stitches with a lighter color. So I'm going to knit 5. Slip my marker, purl 1, and then this would be knit 1 in the row below. So I'm going in the row below the stitch on my needle and sticking my needle in it. Yarn over, pull that stitch out, then I'll let this stitch fall off my needle and see how it gets trapped on the stitch I just did. Okay, purl 1, knit 1 in the row below, 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 purl 1, and then I would slip my marker. So I'm going to take this one out. So this would be following the instructions to the last 6 stitches. Remember, I have 5, I placed my marker, and I have 1. So this would be my purl 1, and then I knit 5. Can you see that? So what we have created here, obviously I have a lot more fabric than what you have, but on yours, you'll just see this little nubbin of nothing. And it'll be like, what did I just do? I can't really tell if I did anything right. Chances are you did. You're just gonna turn your work. And we're gonna be on row 2 this time. So we'll knit 5. Slip my marker. And on this row, we start off with the knit 1 in the row below. So here's a little trick here. When you're doing fisherman's rib, if you're ever confused, if you're like, I'm not sure which row I'm on, find the stitch that you're looking at here. So I'm looking at a knit stitch. You can see that. You're like, okay, that means I know I'm on my knit 1 in the row below. The other thing you can see is, see how this just looks like a normal knit stitch? Like nothing looks goofy down here at all. Whereas the purl next to it, see how it looks like it has 2 scarves on? Like it looks like 2 scarves strangling the neck of the stitch. Can you see that? So that was a knit 1 in the row below previously, okay? So it will help you if you can understand what your stitches look like, so you kind of know what you're supposed to do. So on this first one, we'll knit 1 in the row below, and then we'll purl 1. Knit 1 in the row below, and purl 1. And again, when we knit 1 in that row below, what happens is the stitch that's on my needle, as it falls off, it drops down and it becomes that double scarf of the purl. Can you see that? Can you see that? So obviously this is the knit side. So if I were looking back, there's my double scarf. Purl 1, knit 1 in the row below. And this is how easy it is. You just keep going, working just like this, getting this nice squishy fabric. Now, here's something I really want to point out as you're working this. Because we're knitting 1 in the row below and that stitch gets dropped off, obviously, like I said, it takes 2 rows to complete 1 row in distance. So really, let's say this was like 50 rows. I've actually knitted like 100 rows. Okay, that's what makes it so nice over here on this garter stitch, because it takes really 2 rows to create that 1 ridge. So it's a nice complement to the fisherman's rib without like this becoming like this. But you can see here how squishy it is. The other thing here, as you separate this apart, can you see, let me see if I can, I'm going to use this needle. Let me take those off. As I put this apart, can you see how it doesn't look like just like a basic ribbing? It looks like it has like these sort of elongated ladders that are in the valley of those stitches of the purls. Can you see that? So that's what we're creating. And you would get that same look if you were doing brioche. That's the look you're getting. And it really gets this really nice, squishy, elasticy fabric. Can you see that? All right. And it would be the same thing on the opposite side here. We get this nice squishy fabric. So it is a reversible fabric. You get these nice lines, but going back to the point of when we are letting that one stitch drop down because we knit one in the row below, ripping back is very, very, very difficult with Fisherman's Rib and Brioche. I actually am not even very good at it. So as you're working along, when you get to a point in your fabric that you feel like, okay, this looks really good, I've got a pretty good distance here, I want you to add a lifeline. So I'm going to show you how to add a lifeline to your work, okay? Because it's so important in this, so that way if you had to rip back, you absolutely could rip back. So typically you would want to use like a cotton string or a yarn that's a little bit thinner than the one you have on. I'm just going to use this one because obviously it looks a lot different than the green. So we're just going to use this. I'm going to grab my scissors, and those of you who have been in my classes before know that my pro tip is add a pom-pom to your scissors. You will never lose them. It's so true, you guys. I'm telling you, I don't lose those scissors anymore, which is great. Okay, so I'm just going to take a tapestry needle, and I'm going to thread this string onto my tapestry needle. And because I have this nice cord over here that I can move my stitches to, and I get some extra space, I just move the stitches to the cord, and I'm going to take my tapestry needle and just put it right through all of those stitches. All right, so not like actually like through the stitch. Make sure you don't put it through your stitch marker, okay? Do not go through your stitch marker. Go around your stitch marker. But I'm just going to be pulling that string through those stitches. And I'm just going to let it sit there. I'm just going to let it live there and be its own little happy place. The trickiest part here, though, is when we go to work through the row below on the next row, we have to make sure that we aren't messing things up in any way. So we will work on that together here. But I'm just going to pull this through. I made sure I didn't go through my stitch markers. I've done that so many times. I still make that mistake sometimes, you guys. And what this has done is I've essentially given myself a point in my fabric that I can rip back to. And I know that everything that I would put back on my needles at this point would be exactly what I want on my needles. So if I mess up later on for one reason or another, all is not lost, okay? So I could rip back to where my lifeline is here, and I'd be all right. Now you can see here, I tend to tie mine off just like that because all too often I accidentally yanked it and pulled it out. So I usually give myself a lot of slack. I tie it off and just kind of leave it. All right, you with me so far? Everybody good? Give me a thumbs up. Perfect. All right, so now we're gonna go back and let's go back and do this again. So I'm back to row 1. Here's another note, guys. I added a stitch marker on the right side so that I know which is my right side, just in case I ever get mixed up. Just saying. All right, let's grab some yarn. I apologize if you hear my son. He is 16 and obviously has forgotten that I am on a class. So this is the joy of virtual learning, everybody. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm just going to start off with my knit 5 and I'm completely ignoring my lifeline. See how my lifeline is right there and I'm just completely ignoring it. Just completely ignoring it. I come to my stitch marker. See, I did not put my lifeline through my stitch marker, and that's on purpose. So that way I can still move my stitch marker, right? It's not stuck down there. And now I can jump into my pattern. So it's at this point, I start off with my purl 1. And then I'm going to come here, and this is where I come down, and I'm going to go through the row below. Now, does that mean that it's going to catch into the stitch that's on there? Absolutely. So what you're going to have to remember is if you rip back, I want you to watch this. I'm going to do this. So when we rip back, see how that lifeline is through the stitch that fell down? It's through that one. So when you rip back, it's that one you're going to put on your needle, okay? Because this one will go away. That one will go back on your needle and everything will be back to normal. So nothing is lost by any means by that falling off. It has just been stopped essentially by your lifeline, so that if you have to rip back, you can just put that back on your needle without any issues. Okay, so then we just carry on, and you just ignore that lifeline. Just work your stitches like you normally would. And when you finish your blanket and you've never had to rip back, you can just rip out your lifeline without any issues. Or if you want to keep this lifeline in place, and then maybe you get another 5 or 6 inches and you feel like you're really pressing your luck and you want to add another lifeline, you absolutely can do that. There are no limits to the number of lifelines you can add to a project. They are purely there for your convenience, for your help, so you can add as many as you wish. But you'll notice I'm just going to ignore that lifeline, but it's in place, so if I needed to rip back, I absolutely could do that. Okay? You see that? And that's really important to do, in my opinion, whether you're doing fisherman's rib or you're doing a brioche stitch, because I mean, like I said, like I'm a professional knitting and crochet designer and teacher, and even I still struggle ripping back down, because even look there, you guys, with our lifeline in place, it's still hard to see where the stitches are as you would rip down to fix a mistake so far down. So adding lifelines are absolutely key, especially when I'm doing anything with brioche or fisherman's rib. So yeah, that's how that is. I mean, it's purely that easy. So I'm curious how many of you are working along with me. I would really like us if we could just kind of get, if you're working along, get some rows in so that you can start to see that the fabric is starting to show up, because remember, it takes 2 rows to complete 1 row. And what we're kind of simulating here when we do knit 1 in the row below, we're simulating the brioche knit stitch. And of course, there's the brioche purl as well, but we're just focusing on the brioche knit. But this is very similar to the brioche knit. The result is similar to the brioche knit, because when you do a brioche knit, you get that sort of that double scarf type stitch. And so that's what we're very similarly creating here. One thing you could do, like if we were gonna go rogue and not use a pattern and just kind of use something like this, you could always start off with just basic ribbing and then jump into a fisherman's rib or a brioche stitch and get a different look. And then maybe before you finish it off, you go back to a rib stitch. You could get something different with that. Just remember that a rib stitch is a lot more, no pun intended, it's more closely knit. It has a lot more like this, where this one, it's very forgiving, a very forgiving, squishy sort of stitch, which makes the name of this blanket perfect as a squishy fisherman's rib knit blanket. Let's see here. All right, so I'm going to go through. I'll do these stitches again, showing you how to do the knit 1 in the row below. Let me get some more yarn here. Allie, how am I doing? I feel like I'm just talking a lot.
No, you're doing great.
Everybody good? I don't see a lot of questions, so that's good. Or bad, depending on how you look at it. Okay, so I'm going to get over to the knit. I'm going to slip my marker, and then here we go. So without even looking at my pattern, I know I'm going to start off with a purl because I'm looking at a purl stitch, right? So I'm going to purl it. Now I'm looking at my knit stitch, and I'm going to knit 1 in the row below the stitch that's on my needle. So I'm going to go into the row below, yarn over, and pull up and off. And just so you guys know, the stitch multiple for something like this is obviously, it would be an odd number because you'd want it to be symmetrical. You want to begin and end so that they look the same. Did I knit 1 in the row below? Yes. Could you do this with an even number? Yeah, you totally could, but you obviously would have, things would look just a little bit different at the beginning and the end. And you don't have to have stitches on the outside like I do. I think they look nice, and that's the way they're written in the pattern. I think it looks very lovely. It's interesting because this is actually the swatch that I used, because I did a YouTube video for this particular blanket, and this is the swatch I used for that video. So it's just, I couldn't bring myself to rip it out because it was so pretty, and I was like, I'm just going to work on it every now and again and just keep going with it. And maybe I'll make myself a scarf or a cowl or something because it's just so pretty. You can do just about anything here. Does everybody feel like they're comfortable enough with the knit one in the row below? Yeah, no? Okay, so let's look at it again. So I have a stitch on my needle, and here's the stitch in the row below. I'm sticking my needle right through it, yarn over, and I'm pulling a loop up just like I normally would. And then I just let the stitch fall off my left-hand needle. It's funny because I know a lot of beginner knitters who have accidentally knit this way, because you're getting a really cool knit type look, right? It's just different. And so they've accidentally knit something like this because they just didn't know where to put their needle. Because typically in knitting, it's pretty consistent that you just put your needle in the stitch that's on your other needle. And so I just lost my train of thought. It's pretty consistent. You only work off the stitches that are on the needle, whereas crochet, you can put your hook literally anywhere. So it's a little bit different for knitters. You see this? And if I separate that apart, that's what it looks like. To finish off this pattern, you guys, you keep repeating those, and then you'd end with 7 knit stitches again. So it's that easy. I know that there are people in the Marley's Minions Facebook group that have made this blanket. Like one of the minions showed their husband and their daughter wrapped up in this blanket because they were like, this is the squishiest blanket ever, and it's so comfortable. But this stitch, it's a pretty basic stitch, y'all. And what's going to be interesting are, you guys are going to go and look at like some ready-made stuff, and you're going to notice, you're going to be like, oh, that looks like ribbing. And then you're going to separate it apart and be like, oh, look, it's like a brioche, because that's what it looks like. That's how it looks. All right, so there's a question here. Do I usually use a lifeline after the wrong side row? No, it doesn't matter to me. I add a lifeline wherever I feel like I need to add a lifeline. I am not dependent on whether it's on the wrong side row or the right side row. Either one works for me. I just want to make sure that I have a point in my fabric that I know everything is correct and I can just stop. Now, if you want to be like super, because you could say, okay, I ended on a wrong side row, I'm going to add my lifeline. You could even put a note in your on your pattern telling you that, if you had to rip to your lifeline, it's a wrong side row, so you would know. But again, if you read your knitting, you can tell what row you're on, because if you're looking at purls, you would be on a row 1 if your first one is a purl. Whereas if your first one is a knit, it would be a row 2. How are we feeling? I feel like I've gotten through this really quickly. I feel like
Jan had a question here. She is left-handed and naturally wraps her yarn around the needle from the opposite direction. Does that matter as long as I'm consistent?
So, my instinct is yes, as long as you're consistent, I think you're good. When she knits, I'm curious. So she knits like this? Is that what she does? Or is she like true left-handed and knits? Hold on. Jan, are you true left-handed in that you knit off of your right hand needle onto your left? Meaning like this. Ooh, I cannot seem to get the yarn to hold. Hold on. Now I'll grab that. I'm guessing if she does it like this. Does she knit like this? Or I would actually be purling at this point but I wrap the yarn coming from the other. I'm not sure what that means. I'm not sure what you mean, Jan. Let me try this. Let me go and read the comment again on my own. The way you had it before. Okay, so the way I had before, but I wrap my yarn coming the other direction. So like with your right hand, so you don't go like this, you go like that. Yes, so she's saying she goes over top of the needle. All right, so what that does, Jan, just so you know, when you do that, but with your left hand, so you knit with your left hand, but you bring it over top of your needle like this. I think that's what she means. Looks like it. Okay, so if you do it like this, what that does is when you bring your stitch off, see how, let me do that again. And again. Ooh, muscle memory, man. Okay. See how it makes those stitches rest on your needle to where the back leg is sitting forward from the left? So it almost looks like they're at an angle like this, whereas the other way is they angle sort of this way. The front leg is ahead of the back leg. So that's what makes your stitches different. I'm guessing you probably have to knit them through the back leg too, unless they're twisted. So I'm going to keep going. I'm going to try and answer Jan, everybody. Nope, she knits to the front. Jan, do you have twisted stitches when you knit? All right, so I'm going to purl. And so this would be through the bottom, over like that, and out. It doesn't look like it affects the stitch. It just affects the one that's on my needle. I'm going to keep going this way, Jan. I'm going to try. And I'm confident in doing this because I have a lifeline I can rip back to. All right, so Jan, let's see if I can get through here. Knitting the way you do. This is really different. This is really taking me a minute just to concentrate, just because my muscle memory of how I knit. So, because this is how crocheters do it. Crocheters go over top of their crochet hook. All right, let me see here. All right, so I'm gonna go to the opposite side now. Now that we have a row that's like the way you knit, however, I purled. I wonder if I purled the same way you purl. Okay, so Jan, if I knit the way you knit, and if I go through this front leg, I'm going to twist my stitch, okay? And that's because right now the back leg is the one that wants to be knit. So if I were to go through my front leg and knit the way you do, what that's going to do is at the bottom here, it's twisting the bottom of my stitch. Let me see if I can do it again. And the reason it's doing that is because I'm literally twisting the stitch below. See how those legs of that stitch, it's like they're crossed over one another? Can you see that? That's a twisted stitch. Whereas if I were to go through the back leg and off, it doesn't twist that stitch. You're still wrapping the yarn around differently than I do. I thought I was doing it the same way you did. I'm not real sure then, Jan. Let me see, I'm gonna do that one. So this one, this is the way I thought you were wrapping your yarns. This is the way the stitch lays on my needle. So if this were me, I'd go through the back leg and knit it so that the stitch isn't twisted. See how the legs are apart? Because if I went through the front leg, oh, I just corrected it. If I went through the front leg, it twists the bottom of the yarn. So if I go through the back, that doesn't twist it. Bring the yarn over the right hand needle. Yes, that's what I did. Instead of back to front. Pretty sure that's what I did, Jan. So I'm bringing it over top of the right hand needle. There, this is how you're supposed to do it. I'm not sure. Over top. I'm going to get over here. I'm going to still knit that other way. So for this one, this would be knit one in the row below. This would be my purl. So again, just like before, I'd want to purl the leg that's forward. See how that back leg is forward and that one's back there? So I want to purl the one that's forward.
So it does look like Jan said she thinks she might just be doing it correctly the whole time.
Okay. All right. So, okay. All right.
It just looked differently.
Okay. Then I'm just going to get through this then. I'm going to just bust on through. All right. Good. That makes, I'm just trying to help. Just thought I'd be helpful.
Yeah.
Okay. So now everybody else got a lesson on twisted stitches, on what it looks like. If a stitch is sitting on your needle like so, you want to always knit it or purl it through the leg that's pushing forward. Now I don't know if I actually fisherman's ribbed in the row below on a couple of those because I was just trying to concentrate so much. Okay, anyways, we'll be good. Good. Anything else, Allie?
Yeah, so there's a question here from Barbara, 2 questions. So because does this stitch take significantly more yarn because it's squishy versus a normal rib stitch?
Yes, because just like what we said, it takes 2 rows to complete one. So it's more fabric.
Wonderful. And then she wanted to know if you thought this would make a good scarf.
Yes.
And how many stitches should she cast on for a scarf?
Well, so that would all depend on what your gauge is. So if you do a little swatch like this, like to me, is this big enough for a scarf? I mean, if I wanted kind of a skinny scarf, yeah, but to me, I like mine a little bit bigger. So I would do more stitches than this. So if you're working along with me, just kind of do a measurement of how big like your ribbing section is. Let me see if I can grab my tape measure here if I have one. That's the one thing I should add a pom-pom to, is a tape measure. I can never find those. Okay, so my ribbing section is about 2 3/4. So if I were to say to myself, I want mine, 3 times that amount, and I know I have 13 stitches here, or I don't even know how many stitches I have between this one, but I would just multiply it that much wider. Does that make sense? I would probably still keep my garter stitch along the side because I like it. But yeah, that's what I would do. I mean, that's pretty much how you would go about it. Did that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Good. Going through here.
Would you think this would be a good stitch for cotton yarn?
Yeah, just remember though, because cotton yarn is inherently heavy, and it's already going to get a lot of fabric with this one, it might really pull. So you got to make sure you account for how much weight your piece is going to have at the end. But yeah, I mean, there are store-bought sweaters out there with cotton yarn that use a brioche or a knit one below stitch. So it's all really just going to matter on what the fabric looks like for you. I know I'm going to use a bad word here, you guys, but you have to swatch. Like, you just have to swatch, and that will help you know whether the stitch is good for what you want to use it for with the yarn you want to use it with. And if you feel like it's kind of too fat for you, you can always go down a couple needle sizes to tighten it up. I mean, it's that easy. It's really that easy. I feel like I'm boring some of you. I don't know. I mean, it's like, ta-da, that's it. Because it's really that easy.
Somebody said, let's rip out the lifeline and show us how to pick up the stitches.
Oh, that's a good idea. Thank you. Okay.
We're doing it.
Here we go. Okay. I'll let my markers go. I usually will just rip down, and I'm really just going to rip all the way until I can't rip anymore because the lifeline will stop me. Oh, this is always so terrifying to me, even though I know I have everything safe and secure there. Okay, you see that? So right here, there are all my stitches. See how they're on my lifeline? Now I'm not even gonna take my lifeline out when I go to take it out. But here's another tip. If you have a smaller pair of needles than the ones you're using, use those to pick up your lifeline stitches because it just makes it easier, and then knit onto the correct size needle. All right, and at this point, I'm just putting them on. I'm not worried about if they're twisted or not. They shouldn't be, but I know how to recognize them, and hopefully now you guys do too after my long demonstration. I'm really just putting them all through. Okay, so now I have stitches back on my needle. If I wanted to count them, I could do that. But then as far as making sure, it's just the beauty of circular needles, you guys. I just make sure I pull them all the way through because my yarn is over here. Now I'll grab the needles I was using and I'll just start back in patterns. Let's see how this works. So we have a knit 5. I'll use my marker again. There's my purl, so I'll purl. And again, I'll knit 1 in the row below. And then just keep going. And I'm going to go to the last 6 stitches. These are my last 6 stitches, so I will purl that one, add my marker, and then knit my last 5. See how easy that was to use that lifeline? And I didn't have to like curse at the world or anything because I dropped a stitch. Okay. Makes sense? So then I would turn my work. And just continue on. So lifelines can be used not just in, fisherman's rib, but you can use lifelines in literally everything you do. They are super convenient. Here we go, knit 1 in the row below, purl. Knit, and did you see I kind of separated that out to find the stitch in the row below? Makes it so much easier to have that lifeline in place and not have to find where the stitch is that I need to have on my needles. Now, when you're adding lifelines, there are, like if you're using plain fabric or something, you can use lifelines after the fact. You can add them in. I struggle adding them after the fact with brioche or fisherman's rib for that very reason of that stitch dropping down. But if it were just a normal fabric, sometimes you can just take your knitting needle and just go and pick up your stitches from your lifeline, pick them up like this, but I can't do it with this. I can't see it. So I always add my lifelines. Did that help? Did that help you guys? Yeah. I mean, that's how easy all of this is. I don't know what else to say, Allie.
Well, let's see if I missed any questions. If you have a question and we didn't get to it yet, definitely let us know in the chat. We have plenty of time.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Honestly, you're all sticking around. So let's see if there's any questions that we haven't answered or anything you might want to see again.
I'm wondering if I could, trying to think of how I could show people.
How could you do it in, multicolor?
You can. So if you're going to do multicolor, I got to think through how to say, because I haven't taught to multicolor in a while, but I have to think through how to do this. So what you would do is, you know how I said it takes 2 passes to create one. So let's do one pass with this color, and then we will add another color in, and let's take a look at how to do it. I'll show you. So I'm going to just get through. This would be a row 1, so I'm on a right side row. So I'm going to get through everything that I'm supposed to do with this color. And then this would be called 2-color fisherman's rib. And what you will do is you will not turn your work to work the next row. We'll actually treat our stitches on our needle like a typewriter, and we'll scooch them down on our circular needle and go back to them on the other side of the needle and start the next row. So we really will look at the right side twice. And the other thing is we're going to have to purl one in the row below, if I remember correctly. Okay, so I'm at the end. I'm not going to turn my work. I have to scooch my needles down. This is where I would grab another color. Let me grab a lighter color since you guys had a hard time seeing that other one. I have one just like right here. Okay, is that better? Yeah, that's better. Okay, so I'm going to come down here. Now remember, if I'm keeping this in garter stitch, that means I have to purl these stitches this time, right? Because if I were to knit them, it would give me stockinette. So on this first one, I would purl these to keep them in garter. I'd slip my marker. Now, work with me here as I talk you through this. On the opposite side, this on a row 2, that would have been a knit 1 in the row below. So because we did not turn our work and we're using the opposite color, we will be doing a purl 1 in the row below on this one. And then this one will just be a plain knit. This will be a purl in the row below. Okay, you guys with me? So I'm going to bring my yarn forward, and I'm going to go into the row below the stitch on my needle and purl it and off. Then I'll knit 1, purl 1 in the row below once again, knit 1, purl 1 in the row below, 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 slip my marker, and then purl these. Now, one way you can remember this, if you wanted to do 2-color, is whenever you're having to purl in your garter stitch, that's when you're going to be purling 1 in the row below. Okay, the little tricks, right? So now we have both yarns at the same side, which is your other clue that, okay, both of my yarns are at the same side, which means I can turn my work. So we can turn our work. And what you're going to notice here, if we can get a couple rows in, is one side of our work is going to look like this color, and the other side is going to look like this color. So I start on this side with my green. I'm looking at my knits, so I'm going to have to purl those. Slip my marker. Okay, so before, I had to think through this. I don't want to knit 1 in the row below here, and this is my clue why. 1, if I were to knit 1 in the row below, see how that one is already a double scarf? Okay, so that lets me know it's already been a knit 1 in the row below. So I know on this row, this would be like row 2A, if we called it 2A. I'm going to knit 1, and on this one, I'm going to purl 1 in the row below. Now again, remember what I said to you, when you have to purl those first garter stitches, that lets you know that you're going to be purling 1 in the row below. So those are 2 different ways you can tell. We purled those garters, but then also, if you're looking at the knits and it already looks like there's that double scarf below the one on your needle, you aren't going to knit 1 in the below, right? Because then you're going to get a triple scarf. That one's just a plain knit. Whereas this one, see this purl here? See how there's not a double scarf on that purl? So that lets you know you're going to purl one in the row below. And when you do that, now I have a double scarf and it's of the two colors. Does that make sense? Can you guys tell me if that makes sense to you? It's a great way to be able to read your work. Okay, good. Somebody's telling me it makes sense. Perfect. You guys are making me go rogue here. This is fun though. I love two color brioche or fisherman's rib. It's fun. So I'm at the end, but both colors are not down here. So I'm not going to turn my work. I'm going to use my circulars and put my needle back up over here so I can do my row with this one. Okay. So this would be what I would call 2B, like my row 2B. And I'm looking at pearls, so I'm going to knit them because it's garter stitch. And if I'm knitting stitches out here on my garter stitch, what does that mean for inside my markers? That means I'm going to be knitting one in the row below. Okay, now here's what's cool now that we have two colors. One thing you'll see is the row below, it's going to be going into the color that you're working with. And that's what's going to give us this look on this side. I don't know, you'll be able to see that better as you get going. Okay. Marker and then knit. All right, so that would have been my row 2B. I'm at the end of my row. I have both of my yarns down here, so I would actually turn my work. And then you can start to see here, can you guys see how this side, you really get the green look, but then you can see the hint of the Mai Tai in between. Whereas on this side, it starts to get the Mai Tai in the knits, and you'll see the green in between. So we've turned our row, or it's turned our work. I'm back to color, the first color, and I'm back to what would be like row 1A. So I would knit these first stitches. And my clue there is if I'm knitting those garter stitch, then I will be doing a knit one in the row below instead of the purl one in the row below. Make sense? Two color fisherman's rib is really pretty. It's a lot of fun to do. It just takes some memorizing, and it can be a little bit confusing because of the different stitches. But if it's written out for you, like I would have written this out as like I would have just finished row 1A, and then I'm getting ready to work what would be called 1B. Okay, so I'm still on the right side, but I'm on my B color. And so this is how I would have written it. I would write it as this is my 1B row. And then 1B starts with 5 pearls. And those pearls give me a clue that I'm going to be doing purl ones in the row below. So whenever I see a pearl, I'm going to be doing a purl one in the row below. And then I knit one, purl one in the row below, 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 and then, oops, I got to purl these to keep my garter stitch. It got really quiet in here. So I have both yarns over here. That's my clue that it's now time for me to turn. So I turn my work. You can see here, this is where the Mai Tai is really starting to show up in those knits on this side. And it starts, I still get the green over there on that side, but I get the hint of the green in between. So if I were to write this out, I would say that I'm getting ready to start my row 2A, because this is the second row and I'm using my color A. And row 2A is just like row 1B, where I start off with the pearls. Because we're kind of simulating here garter stitch in the round. That's why I have to purl those, you know, because I didn't actually turn my work. All right, so I'm going to knit this one and purl one in the row below. Knit this one, purl one in the row below, and so on and so forth. How you guys feeling? What are they saying, Allie? Are they like, huh?
No, I think people are
No?
really, really enjoying this.
Yeah, oh, good.
CS Crafters, you've given everybody some great feedback. So thank you there, CS
Thank
Crafters.
you.
Jan said thank you so much for taking the time to work through the right-handed problems today.
You're
She said
welcome,
you
Jan.
are a great teacher.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. And can I just tell you guys, I'm really impressed with my skills to show you two colors, because I haven't done this in years. Like, because it's just one of those things I just haven't worked on in a long time. So I'm like, oh yeah, this is what it was. Just remember. All right, so if I were to write this out, this would be row 2B. Okay, so I'm using my color B. I'm on my second row. And because I'm looking at purl bumps over here for my garter stitch, I'm going to knit them. So, I mean, then this is just like a row 1, essentially, you know what I mean? Pretty easy. So as I'm knitting those, I know I'm going to work a knit one in the row below. Yep, this one is just one of those ones you have to think about. If you're going to do two colors, it really is helpful to have it written out. But it's a lot of fun to do, because you really get the two-sided look, you know, you get a multicolored look on each side. But this is a really great example of how it really is 2 rows to complete one, because obviously you're watching it, it takes 2 rows to complete one full pass. See? I mean, it's a lot of fun when you have the 2 colors, because you get that hint of the opposite color in the cracks, in the valleys on one side, and the same on the other.
That's fantastic.
Isn't that fun? That was a good idea, guys. I should have thought about that. I should have thought about showing you that, like, if to stall for time, but I didn't think about it. So thank you for asking. Like, that's good. That's really pretty.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for today, Marley, and thank you everybody for joining us. Just a reminder, this class will be available on michaels.com/classes starting tomorrow. And we look forward to having you back in future classes. Don't forget to sign up for more. And we're always excited to see new faces and returned faces. So
absolutely. It's so nice to see so many people in here that I recognize. So hi, everybody. Now that you can see my face. So fun.
Thank you all so much and have a great rest of your day.
Bye, guys.
Bye.